Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I want to talk about signs you're an emotionally stable and decent man, as well as maybe if you're a lady, you want to know if your significant other is an emotionally stable and decent man. Today, we're going to talk about those signs, and then towards the end, we may summarize if I remember to. But the first one is that you don't play games on purpose. You don't try to leave any room for confusion, and you will explain yourself if necessary. A lot of emotionally stable and decent men feel like games in general is it's a very annoying thing to deal with. And so a lot of these types of men don't really tolerate games because they would rather just live a very stable life. Playing games on purpose shows typically emotional instability, and men who are already stable or are pretty decent, they don't want to invite more instability in their life. Life in general is difficult and it's unpredictable. And so if somebody is unstable, it's very unlikely they want to invite that because they're emotionally mature enough to realize that they can only control what they can control. And part of controlling who they let in their life helps them to manage their own life and let them stay emotionally stable and decent. Because even an emotionally stable and decent man can be driven to unimaginable emotions if he's with a lady who is absolutely emotionally unstable. And men know that typically. And so they try to stay away from people like that. And so in turn, they also are not that way, if that makes sense. They don't play games on purpose. They don't tolerate games. Then if you're looking for more exclusive content from me that might be a little bit more controversial or will touch on maybe expansive topics, we do have a group for that. We do so many other things in that as well, but I do post videos that are a little more exclusive on there. And that is our group that's pinned in the comments. And if you'd like to join, it is $10 a month. The next one is that if you're a man who's emotionally stable, you are honest with people, even if it hurts. Men like this, they'd rather be genuine than risk disappointing somebody in the long run. And a lot of women who are emotionally unstable or imbalanced, they actually don't like this. And so a lot of men who are decent, they naturally have almost like a vetting process with their own personality to stay away from emotionally unstable women, because a lot of women, they'd rather hear nice words. And men who are like this, they tend to be more like action oriented, and their words back up their actions instead of just saying nice words just to trick or manipulate. Decent and emotionally stable men do not like to do that. And they don't like putting themselves in that position. And they don't like putting others in the position to be a recipient of that. And so they tend to be honest. The next one is they try to understand how people feel, even if they don't understand it. Decent and emotionally stable men, they want to understand how people feel because they understand what it feels like to not be understood, but they also they listen to learn. And so if somebody is saying something, even if they don't fully understand, they want to reflect and try to see what they can learn from this opportunity or experience. And a lot of emotionally stable and decent men, a lot of them are not necessarily always talkers, or they don't always talk. That doesn't sound right. They like to focus on listening. That doesn't mean they don't talk about themselves. And a lot of them, it may benefit talking about themselves. However, when people are explaining how they feel, they like to sometimes take the back seat, at least temporarily, so they can really absorb what people are saying. So that's a sign that somebody is emotionally stable and decent. They try to do that. The next one is they're consistent instead of hot and cold or using grand gestures. Women believe in grand gestures, not all of them. And it's a recipe for disaster to some extent, because men who are mentally unstable, they can use grand gestures to manipulate these women, whereas a man who's emotionally stable and decent, he doesn't need grand gestures because he's not overcompensating for anything. He knows that he has something good to offer, and he's going to try his best to improve as he can, but he knows overall by a standard, he's pretty decent. He knows that. And so he doesn't need those grand gestures to manipulate or trick anybody because he knows that he's a good guy. And so a lot of women, unfortunately, don't look at decent and emotionally stable men because they fall for these grand gestures and they think that's romance. And it could be a form of romance, but it's usually really unhealthy. Or they fall for like hot and cold type of guys instead of men who are more consistent, more honest. And a hot and cold type of guy is like a guy who's very emotional at one point and then randomly he like disappears or he's very detached. Whereas emotionally consistent, stable, decent men, even if it's not perfect, it's still there. They tell you good morning every day. They always show up to dates. They communicate with you if they're stressed at work. They're consistent. They're not perfect, they're consistent. And women get that confused. And unfortunately, I think that is to the ladies' detriment because then you miss out on really good men. The next one is these types of men actually are pretty non-judgmental. And I think that's so obvious, but unfortunately, a lot of women, they kind of thrive. And I'm not trying to hate women here, by the way. I am a woman, so that doesn't I don't hate women. I'm just trying to say that a lot of women, I want to help everyone as much as I can. A lot of women, they kind of are used to, I guess, drama and gossip. Some of them really are. And I know ladies like that. And so they actually can sometimes be a little judgmental. And we all can be judgmental, I think, to some extent. But what I mean by non-judgmental is they try not to be judgmental. They try to work on it, men who are decent. And so women who are a little bit judgmental, they may actually fall for men who are judgmental because they feel like a judgmental man is like hard to earn and they like almost put him on a pedestal. And it's like a form of like childhood trauma. And so like maybe their parents were really rigid or judgmental. And so they tried to earn that love. And so some women are wanting like these judgmental men because it reminds them of their father who didn't love them or whatever that experience is, right? And so an emotionally stable and decent man doesn't need to judge people because he doesn't need to feel superior to people, right? Because people who are very judgmental, sometimes it comes from the fact that they need to feel superior because they feel insecure inwardly. And men who are decent and emotionally stable don't feel that way. And so they just are non-judgmental naturally. The next one is that they're actually safe over exciting. Women don't understand this as much as I think they need to. Some women. A man who gives you consistent foundation, and you guys who are emotionally decent men, you know this, but a man who's like emotionally, they're consistent, they give this constant, stable foundation, they are not going to be like very exciting because there's not any hot and cold, there's not a lot of impulsivity because this man has a stable life. He's got a normal job. He's just a decent guy. He doesn't hate anyone. He has some friends. Like he's just calm, right? And he takes a lot of time to understand who he wants to be with. And so when he is with somebody, he does want to provide a safe environment to his best abilities, right? He doesn't need to be overly passionate, but he's reliable. He doesn't need to impress you in like a million ways, but he's there and he's going to open up his inner world when he's ready. He's safe. He's not exciting, but he's safe. And women tend to fall for excitement more. Excitement is a combination of anxiety, uncertainty, unawareness, and a lot of things that sometimes could spell a recipe for disaster. And that's unfortunate. The next one is that he doesn't use violence or raising his voice to keep somebody quiet. And the last one is that a man who's emotionally stable and decent, he works on himself for the betterment of himself, his family, or others around him. And so to summarize, men like this, they don't play games. They're honest with women. They try to understand how other people feel. They're consistent. They're non-judgmental. They provide safety rather than excitement. They don't use violence, and they want to work on themselves. So that's my perspective of what I think emotionally stable and decent men look like. This is just a small example. There are plenty of other examples. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.